Welcome back, Stu, to Dreadnought News. Thank you for joining us again this evening. Sorry I missed out on last week's. I have a pretty hectic work schedule, but it seems like you do too as well. So,
Yeah. We're
I
fitting it
know.
in.
Yeah, we are. We're finishing it because it's just too interesting not to talk about.
I
So
know.
it's all
Yeah, it's been
happening.
a few weeks for sure.
I know we were going to talk about. Well, I remember you predicted there would be no rate cut, and I said there shouldn't be, but there will be. And then that ended up happening last Tuesday, which we didn't get to talk about. So the time, and then
Yeah,
there was that new Resolve poll that came out on the weekend, which had Labor on 25% primary. Like, holy shit!
yeah, that's a
Uh,
that's a catastrophe. I'm
that,
uh yeah, I mean, what can you say about that poll cut? I mean, it's impossible to take these people seriously, right? Like they talk about politicization of the institutions. And I mean, I'm not saying it happened. I'm just saying, were it to turn out that Anthony Albanese was mailing dead animals to the Reserve Bank governor, I wouldn't be surprised.
but they
um,
really thought they were going to get a bump in the polls. They thought, yes, this is just what we
yeah,
need.
but
A rate cut that'll get us over the top. Nobody cares. Everyone's realizes that the
it's a
Reserve Bank.
0.25 rate cut with a note saying no more until after the election.
Yeah, but but also the Reserve Bank is an independent board. Like it's not, it's like nobody's going to
Oh
credit
yeah,
the
but I mean,
government for
Labour have
that.
done everything they can to do to make it unindependent, right? Like they've stacked the board with three of their stooges.
Yeah.
At every opportunity, they're trying to say, "Oh, the Reserve Bank should repurpose its mission to invest in our boondoggles."
Oh
Like,
yeah, I know.
yeah, I mean, it, it's like one step back from that blatant. You know what
Mm.
I mean? Like they should loan directly to CBus, and CBus should construct the suburban railway independently.
But I can't believe they were just like all their eggs were in that basket. Like, yes, we've got a rate cut. That definitely means we're going to go up in the polls. And they just continue going down. Like, how do you
Yeah,
feel about that? So then they
yeah.
got
Oh,
the,
well, look, I think what's happening there is, in the first place, even on most mortgages, a 0.25% rate cut equates to stuff all. Like you might knock $1,000 off your payment over the course of a year. So it's not exactly manna from heaven. Um, and two, to achieve it, they had to put unprecedented public pressure on the Reserve Bank to give them a political win from an institution who's supposed to independently use science-based policy to determine monetary policy.
Hmm.
So they got their political win in the foulest of circumstances, and I think they're being punished for it. I
No,
think that's what's going on.
you're understating it, Stu, because the method they used to depress inflation in the first place was the most worst, like the voodoo economics is like
Mm.
totally destructive in the long term to suppress the price, signals by using government subsidies, temporary government subsidies, which is going to hamper investment in the
Well, But,
infrastructure that we
but yeah,
need.
but I suppose I am understating that. To echo that, subsidies by definition don't affect inflation.
No, but
Subsidies
that's
by
that's
definition make inflation worse.
oh well,
Like,
that's what the Reserve Bank said as well. They said, look, you might have
yeah,
got the CPI into the 2 to 3% band, but once we strip out the subsidies, which is what they call core inflation, it's actually over 3%, and so it's still not in the target band. And the government was like, it's not in your mandate to worry about core. It's only in your mandate to worry about CPI. And they really put the pressure on thick. But yeah, it's
yeah.
dirty
Oh,
behavior.
and now we can have a good back and forth about who's underselling it most. You're not taking into a fact that they've also adjusted how they count CPI,
Yeah,
non-core CPI. So
they just
even
yeah,
core CPI is the core CPI is a total fantasy.
it's the CP lie.
Yeah, it's a total fantasy. There is no way we've had 4 years of 3% core inflation when my power bill has gone up 280%. No, no, no. That's just a lie. It
Yeah,
didn't go up three because what is the measure? It's annually, isn't it? So a 3 year compounding interest at 3% does not equate to a 280% gain. So it's the CPI figures are just an outright lie. So like even if you were to go to like core CPI, even that's a politicized lie. So yeah, the idea that we're being independent by focusing on core CPI, a better way to say that is we're not being as grotesquely overtly political as confining ourselves to the headline CPI number. But yeah, anyway.
yeah. I
And yeah, it's outrageous. It's outrageous.
Yeah, it was. Luckily, most people seem to have seen through it. So then, of course, they rolled out that old chestnut Medi scare, which I said to you during the week. You know, you can set your watch. Look at this. I got one of these.
There's an
I got
election
one of
in
these
12
mechanical.
weeks.
Yeah, I can literally set my. Oh, what time is it? Oh, of course, they've just rolled out the Medi scare campaign. It's 8 o'clock. It's like every election cycle, they do
Yeah,
that.
like yeah. But this time it's so ridiculous they're having to like deceptively edit quotes. Like
Yeah, and bulk billing is lower under Labor than it was under the coalition government. Like, guys, did you even check the numbers before?
yeah.
Oh,
But I mean, this is the trouble with like having a bunch of painfully retarded student politicians who are all DEI hires, right?
yeah,
They're all they're all DEI hires, um, in the sense that a bunch of them are there to fill various diversity quotas, but the rest of them are there because they're union stooges. They're there because they're loyal to their respective union. They're
mm.
not there because they're skillful. And
They're a bunch of midwits.
skillful or intelligent politicians. Like you look at Claire O'Neill, was it Katie Gallagher was going on about shares being bought today? I mean,
That was their third thing. First was we're going to win because there's a rate cut. Second was we're going to scare them with Medicare. But none of those two work. So the third thing is, Dutton is an inside trader when he wasn't even in government.
Dutton,
He
Dutton
was
bought shares in the dip
in the GFC
18 years ago.
when he was in opposition, basically almost a backbencher, like wasn't getting briefings from anyone. Oh, he's an insider trader. What? Seriously,
Yeah,
they
but
are
I mean,
desperate. They are desperate.
yeah, oh yeah, and to do it under the cloak of parliamentary privilege is particularly filthy. But what I want to see though, right, is I want to see a Liberal Party willing to punch back. And by punch back, that well, parliamentary privilege means I can say anything. So I'm pretty sure that you eat babies, Katie Gallagher. What is it that you find so tasty about infants? Do you abort the babies and then eat the fetuses? Um, I just, because we could say anything, anything goes. Um, that's why you're so keen on late term abortion, isn't it? You're hungry and you want to eat fetuses. You heard it here first. Dreadnought News. Katie Gallagher is a vampire who feeds on aborted fetuses.
They've got a whole cohort of these aggressively average female midwits in Labour. There's like Annika Wells, um, yeah, Katie
Claire
Gallagher.
O'Neill.
Yeah, even the
But
foreign minister.
then I mean, it's not like the blokes are carrying the team.
Wong
Like
is
Chris
pretty
Allen
smart.
is a demented retard, and
How is
Tony
Tony
Burke is an
Burke's?
idiot. Elbow is an average man, and I think what's the Jimbo Nomics, the treasurer. That man sounds kind of good on TV, like he can deliver a speech, sort of. But when the pedal hits the metal, as far as I can see, he's also absolutely average.
No, he
Like he
has.
can read out he can read out a briefing sheet from the Treasury Department, but as far as I can see, he's just bereft of any actual economic nous. I've
He
never
has
seen him
the
off the cuff give. You know how a good example is Tim Costello back in the day. He could
Peter,
be taken
Peter,
off point.
Peter Costello.
Yeah, Peter Costello. Sorry. He could be taken off point, and you could see he had a deep grasp.
Oh yeah.
So he could be dragged off point, and once you're away from his talking points, he can say things. He was able to say things about economics that were really profound and tied in with their vision for their economic plan. Jim Chalmers can't do that.
No, because they
And
don't
neither
have an
does Wayne
economic.
Swan.
They don't have an economic plan. That's the point.
Yeah,
Their economic
but
plan is just spend as much as we
a
can,
large
like
part of the reason they
socialism.
don't have an economic plan, though, is that they don't have any economic knowledge.
No, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
His
So you still remember Wayne Swan? Like, I remember watching an interview with him. It was just before. Oh no, it could have been after actually. I think they were doing the stimulus packages at that point. And a couple of, I don't know which reporters it were, but they were asking about cost of capital, and the guy simply did not compute the concept. You could watch his expression go blank. And they asked a couple of questions, and he was talking about, oh, well, in a capital raise, blah, blah, blah. No, not the concept, mate. Talking about cost of capital.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, he was like a bureaucrat and like a union official. He has no understanding of economics. And
yeah, and it's
Jimbo was an academic. Again, no real world
not
understanding.
a historian.
Not in economics, yeah, in like
Yeah,
Labour Party history of the 70s
yeah,
and 80s. Like, how is that relevant to running the Australian economy? It's not. We've got to get better people in. So yeah, they need to
yeah.
go. But how disgusting was the stunt that Tony Burke pulled? This has made me question the validity of democracy as a concept. If the incentive is there for some sleazy bastard like Tony Burke to pull a stunt like that, naturalizing 20,000 Muslims to vote for him and basically disenfranchise, like cancel out the voice of myself, yourself,
Oh, and the people
19,998
in
other
those
people.
electorates, right?
Yeah, exactly. That if the
It's
incentive is there to do that, maybe we need to reconsider democracy, and we'll talk about another reason why to reconsider democracy later on, I guess. But yeah, that was disgusting. Stu, I can't hear you.
the High Court. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Sorry.
Yeah. The High Court needs to get a bit of a pants kicking about their recent decision making RE citizenship. Um, uh, I am still firmly of the view that, for example, those terror nurses in, particularly the guy
Bankston.
in Bankston Hospital, I think there's, a compelling argument to say that his decision was based on false information, and in particular, he lied about the character test, because it has now come out that he immediately prior to getting his citizenship attended a mosque in which he went on this rave about how amazing martyrdom is, and we should all be martyrs, and we have to hate the non-believers and the infidels, yada 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 yada. Now, I don't know exactly what questions get asked in the character test, but advocating terrorism is a
Is
is a
that,
fairly big no-no, which
yeah.
he had to have concealed.
Yeah, we don't want
He said, "Oh,
Islamic
actually, no, I was
terrorists.
just down at if I was down at the mosque on Sunday, Mr. Burke, and I was saying it's just really great to blow yourself up in the name of Islam and kill as many Jews as you can. It's the best. So many virgins. Yeah, that guy. Maybe we don't give it, but so I think the High Court needs to be taken to task about people are clearly lying on the character test, and the character test needs to be beefed up. Um, in the sense that if you lie on it, there has to be a right to take it back because you obtained it under false pretenses. And second, there has to be an exception about malfeasance of the minister making the decision. If the minister makes just a fraudulent decision like Tony Burke has here to award citizenship for the sole purpose of affecting the outcome of an election, those citizenships have to be voidable. Or otherwise the constitutional order has no power to protect itself. What's stopping him doing it? You know what I mean? What's stopping him doing it to 200,000 people? You'd be able to find them. You'd be able to find them in the permanent residence and just relax the character test to the point with like, you're not currently murdering someone, are you? Okay. Well,
let me check in. No knife. Oh,
yeah,
no knife in that one. Okay, you're good.
Yeah. Yes, come on in. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the Constitution does have principles associated with it for malfeasance in office. So Peter Dutton has to be getting legal advice right now on how these citizenships get undone. I mean, and the AEC, someone there needs a proper head kicking. Because the AEC have turned up at these citizenship ceremonies to enroll people to vote. It's that flagrant. Now the AEC
where they invited the Labor candidate for Fowler, and they didn't invite the sitting member for Fowler, even though she's literally the local councillor as well, and it's the local council supposed to run these ceremonies. They didn't even invite her, but they invited the Labor candidate challenging her. It was very, very unprofessional. It's a conflict of interest. It was just disgraceful.
There's no serious question what was happening. He's diluting the vote of the citizens that are angry with him and his performance and Bowen and Bowen's performance, and he's hoping to snatch back Fowler. But I'm very confident that Fowler is Daly's this election.
She'll hang on for sure.
Yeah, they're not getting her out, and they're not getting her out now because of this stunt. I reckon that's the way that's going to roll. But the general point is that like we've had a high court for sort of since about 2017 that's been willing to do all kinds of stupid shit. Like, for the record, I think Al-Katab was a bad decision. I think the idea of the Australian government being able to essentially detain someone in immigration detention indefinitely, that's not okay. So I don't think the government should have the power to do that. But it was also a High Court decision that had been affirmed and reaffirmed for something like, when was it decided? It was like early 2000s. It's been and Al-Katab wasn't even a new decision. Al-Katab was already confirming what the High Court had more or less said up until that point. So they're reversing at least 20 years of absolutely certain precedent. Now, the High Court's absolutely entitled to do that, although people need to think about that and say, well, if we want to go down that road, how about we put some people on there and say Mabo was wrongly decided?
I'd be up for that.
So, be careful what you wish for if we want to go around.
You said the precedent.
Overturning precedent like that. But what I was getting at is that overturning, I think Al-Katab is right to have been turned over. But there needs to be a bit of a harmonization between that and the external affairs power. So yes, you can't detain people forever, but the reason that we can't deport these people back to where they came from is the Refugee Convention. So by entering into the Refugee Convention using the external affairs power, the High Court's position currently appears to be that you can use the external affairs power to render the ability to enforce borders in certain cases impossible. So the High Court says you can't detain them, but you can't deport them. So when they get here, what do you do? And my personal solution would be we withdraw from the Refugee Convention and amend the Migration Act accordingly.
Tony Burke's solution is to slap him into a ceremony. Get him
Yeah.
get him a pen and
I would,
paper.
I,
They
but
can
I'm
vote.
deadly serious about that. Like, we can redo, uh, we can adjust the Migration Act to be like a real refugee scenario. But the Refugee Convention was brought into existence to deal with a very specific problem, and that problem was Jews fleeing the Holocaust. We are now getting people who are Christian turning up from Iran saying, I can't go back to Iran because I'm Christian, and then go on holiday back to Iran. But the refugee status remains.
Mm.
So there has to be bolstering around that, because part of the problem is that you get like these ridiculous jurisdictions. So the Refugee Convention gets informed by international law because the courts are trying to make it so that the interpretation of the Refugee Convention is consistent, because it's an international instrument. So all the people should interpret it the same way, which that's like at the local level, that's a totally reasonable principle. But it's not taking into account that Europe have lost their fucking mind.
Mm.
And so their interpretation of the Refugee Convention is total insanity. So there's no need to harmonize our interpretation of it with frigging lunatics. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part. Yeah, it's so transparent now that it's part of their plot to vote. You know, it's like they said. It's like the government wasn't happy with the will of the people, so they got another people.
People, yeah. We're going to import new voters, yeah.
Yeah,
And this is the thing, right? Like, what will happen now is, oh, you're just doing culture wars.
but there's something else which is darker.
Will be the response. But
Look, there's
that strategy of importing new voters, that's Democrat politics. That's overt Democrat politics.
okay.
I think it was Hillary's campaign manager. It's like Yuan, someone like that.
Mm,
He's a Hispanic fella. He just straight up said, that's exactly what we're doing. We're importing new voters.
mm,
And we're planning to import enough voters that we've got an invincible majority and turn the United States into a one-party state.
And
Now,
it's luckily it doesn't seem to be working exactly like that hope. But there is something also darker that we have to talk about here, Stu, which no one likes talking about, and I get why. I do get why, but I'm just going to share my screen here. So this is the wide political gap that has opened up between young women and young men in Germany. And Germany has been, it worked much worse than Australia with refugees. And women have just swung so and so this some people say that it's biological. Like back in the tribal days, the men would fight, but if your men got defeated and the other tribes men came in, the women would just embrace them, for survival reasons. They would just embrace them. They would embrace the invaders. Maybe because they had to, didn't have a choice, but that is sort of hardwired into women biologically. Maybe that's true. I don't know. It's a reasonable thing to theorize about, I think. But all around the world, this is happening. And this, and so I kind of think like
the overall political leanings in the UK, Jesus.
I know, but even still, there's a huge gap. And so this is women and men have a duty to each other. We can't, and women are not fulfilling their duty to communicate and understand the perspective of men, which they need to be doing. Yes, men need to do that as well. This is a disaster, you know. But in situations like this, like women, you need to come back. You need to communicate. You need to resolve differences. You just can't do this. This is just it's immoral. It's a dereliction of your duty, women, to be
Mhm.
doing this. You got to be more reasonable. Otherwise, we can't have democracy. You know,
Yeah,
we
I my views on it, and I think this is actually borne out. So like USAID and DOJ, DO Department of Education. I'm not the only person to have voiced this, but I remember when they first started going after that, I was like, you watch, they are going to kick on this hard. Uh, and yes, it's fair to say that USAID, if you were to cancel the entire budget of USAID, you're not even 1% of the way to budget repair in the United States. But,
80
but
billion a year funds a lot of left-wing activists.
yeah, that mistakes what's actually going on there. What's going on there is ripping up um, the patronage, the left-wing patronage network.
Mm.
And that $80 billion has been buying them very big outcomes. So, for example, this week I saw in the UK, the gay and lesbian charity that's been pushing child mutilation, Stonewall,
Yeah.
they're going to have to sack 50% of their staff
Yes.
because the US aid money dried up.
I read
Now,
that too.
what on earth was US taxpayer dollar doing advocating LGBT rights
In England.
in the UK,
Yeah.
in
Think of all the
England?
taxpayers in the American Bible Belt paying for like something so diametrically opposed to their values.
Yeah,
And they're paying for
but
it.
then what? Yeah, but then what happens is that is how the domestic Americans get around things like the First Amendment.
Mm.
That's the international network. So what happens is they pay Stonewall to advocate the UK government to make laws about restrictions of speech for social media. And then the social media companies are like, well, England's doing it, and we only want to, we just have to go with, we don't want to have separate policies for separate countries.
Mm.
Well, so what, you just do the most censorious country and comply with whatever they say? What? So that's part of how they've been so effective in the last 10 years about social media censorship. And $80 billion buys a lot of that outcome. The second big thing is the indoctrination in all public schools in the entire West
Mm.
starts at day naught. And uh, I haven't taken a look recently, but I helped my nephew out with like a civics, was doing a civics exam. Um, and we went through his textbook, and his textbook was talking about why you've got to have an impartial judge in a court. Now, the answer to that is really, really obvious. It's so obvious it shouldn't actually need to be explained. Like, you
That's
don't
what
want
justice is.
you don't want the person deciding a dispute to be on one side or the other of the dispute. That's not what was explained in the textbook, though. In the textbook, they said, well, women were really oppressed, so we've got to have judges to be able to reconcile not oppressing women, and people of color were really like they they reframed. This is an Oxford published textbook that's mandatory in all Victorian high schools. They reframed blindness before the law as communist DEI crap. Now, my feeling is that, like, because when you look at that those graphs, the split changes a lot once you get women who are over 30 and women who are married. They take a nosedive away from the far left.
Mm.
So what we're seeing there is decades of billions of dollars being poured into propagandizing children.
Yeah. And
And
conservatives
and
paid taxes for it.
and And look, I mean, if you were to do the reverse and say, if you were to spend $80 billion educating all Australian males that women are the superior class and everything that's bad in your life is because of women, I would expect I would expect them to vote in overall massive, ridiculous numbers for the person who was promising to sort something out about the women. But that's the Labor strategy. Well, we need to guarantee X number of jobs are held aside for women because women are oppressed, and a 13-year-old woman in Australia in 2025 is going to earn 25% less than a man doing the exact same work. And they feed them this bullshit from day dot. It starts before grade one. It starts before grade one. So in some respects, I'm sympathetic to those people because we don't fully appreciate the fire hose of propaganda that's been blasted directly in their face
Mm.
their entire lives.
Yeah, I know.
So I think that's why I think I'm glad Elon is doing Dodge because that guy is very, very good at identifying pain points and exploiting them hard.
Yeah.
So, um, uh, well, like so, for example, I saw some in talking about something. He sacked someone at SpaceX, and it was to do with the redesign of those engines, the Raptor engines. He was saying, "Why are we paying $2,400 for this piece of the engine?" And the guy didn't really have a good answer. And he said, well, it's manufactured, blah, blah, blah. And he came back and said, well, no, there's $200 worth of aluminium or steel or whatever it is. Where does the other $2,200 go?
Mm.
What's it being spent on? There's only $200 worth of steel here. It can't be that much to bend steel into shape. What's going on? But that's what I'm getting at, right? Like, so by identifying pain points like that, so we're paying way too much for fabrication here. The fabrication cost should only be, a small percentage of the raw material cost over that for
Yeah.
individual parts. And he was zoomed in on that and attacked it. And I think that's exactly what's going on with the left-wing patronage network. They're going, like you can see this time around, it's probably not just Elon Musk. There's a lot of people playing there, like Stephen Miller, people like that, who are like, if you want to go at them, you've got to rip up here, 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 and here, and attack them on these fronts without mercy and as fast and as hard as you can. And so far, it seems to be a rousing success.
Yeah.
Like,
It's been
I
brilliant.
I saw an MSNBC, I think it was, that like they're trying to have this guy who was an IRS agent. He's just been sacked from his probation. And he's crying, and it was my dream job. And like, are you seriously going to say you're trying to drum up sympathy for the tax auditors with the general public? Oh no, a tax auditor, one less tax auditor. The horror, the horror. Have
I
you
think
never
we'll
had
survive.
contact with the tax office? Like, what's going on here?
No, I
That
think
doesn't even make it possible to make sympathetic.
that's one frontline service I think we'll survive if it gets cut. So
Yeah. But then on top of that, he was on TV saying this was my dream job. Like, so he went on there and he started from like Hitler levels of sympathy and managed to go downhill. I like just reaming people over small expenditures that they've claimed on their taxes and deduction.
Yeah.
And
eBay
threatening
sellers
to,
making $600 profit. Oh, I gotta get them. File
yeah.
your taxes. Ah.
How? But it just goes to show they're over the target, right? Like meltdowns like this happen when you're over the target. So,
Yeah. Yeah, well, the
um,
the left is scrambling. They are in the United States. They're just been scattered. Hopefully, in Australia, like this government just looks like it doesn't have a clue. They're running scared of Peter Dutton, and he, like I said, he is the Terminator. They can't lay a
yeah,
finger on him.
I look. I've definitely got my problems with him. I think his position on internet censorship and internet like control of the internet is dangerous.
Oh, I think he's the boomer whisperer. Like,
Yeah,
I
but
think he knows exactly what boomers want to hear, and he just like because boomers like, kids these days get to use social media too much. Peter Dunne's like, oh well, I'm gonna burn burn disinformation. Like, obviously, you and I know that's complete nonsense, but he's the
yeah,
boomer
yeah, yeah.
whisperer. So,
But yeah, look, I was having a discussion with work because the nature of our work is you expect to see a whole bunch of like frivolous regulations come through because Labor on the way out the door like to go, we're going to regulate this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And sure enough, there's like 6 sets of new regulation coming through.
our federal
Um,
regulations.
yeah, for our industry.
Ugh.
Um, most is meant to be implemented between now and about September this year. So just yeah, another 6 sets of expenses in order to provide the service. And for some reason, they think that that doesn't. Yeah, like my boss flat out said, like it's like they only want the NBN to be able to provide internet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're
They
intentionally crowding out.
they obviously do. That's the whole moral hazard of even having a government
Yeah.
run business in the first place.
Um, but uh, a lot of whether we actually have to implement it or not will turn on whether or not they're still in power in May. And he said, oh, it's a first, like the guy that I've been working with on it is saying, oh, it's a first term government. They almost always get re-elected. I reckon the chances of, I reckon the chances of a change of government are less than 10%. And I'm like, no, I think you're wrong on that. I honestly think Dutton is going to get there.
Well,
Uh,
that also ignores the fact that the last two times a first term government was re-elected, they needed to swap leaders to do it. So
yeah, that's
the
true.
Libs had to swap out Abbott to win that election, or maybe anyway, that's what they did. And then
Yeah.
before that, the ALP
Like,
swapped out Rudd for Gillard,
yeah.
and so it wasn't the last time a prime minister has won re-election after winning government from opposition was John Howard. It was
Mm.
John Howard in 1998, and that was a close run
Although, but
thing.
in fairness to that, though, the time before that was the immediately prior PM set. So Bob Hawke won re-election from what's his face?
That was interesting. Bob Hawke, what became the opposition leader the day the election campaign was called, or about. So that was interesting. And then yeah, he was very successful. Albanese is no Bob Hawke.
No, 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 he is not. Say what you will about Bob Hawke, but he was that guy just oozed charisma.
Yeah.
Very, very likable guy, but it also had mental grunt. Like I don't
He was
know,
on,
it's a bit like Bill Clinton. You know what I mean? Like
he was an
Bill
Oxford
Clinton.
scholar. He was smart
Yeah,
as a
yeah, he was a Rhodes
whippersnapper.
Scholar. Yeah,
A
so
Rhodes scholar, yeah.
Bill Clinton. Say what you will about his presidency, but he's got that ability to be super chummy and
So
affable.
yeah,
But he
yeah.
is a smart, smart man.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
he's got a razor intellect.
Bill
Um,
Clinton, yeah, Bill Clinton was a decent president. I don't have time to justify that because we're running out of time. So, but I do think Bill Clinton, in terms of being preferable to the Obama and Biden regimes, I think Bill
oh
Clinton.
yes, there's no choice there.
Anyway, I have to go, Stu. Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, all right. Talk soon.
Yeah, speak next week. Bye.